name is Roxi Beck, and I'm the Director of Consumer Engagement for the Center for Food Integrity, and I just appreciate you joining us today to dig in and really understand what we are starting to understand about Gen Z. What we do know about this generation is they're poised to change the face of this food industry. Born, in a specific time frame, putting them about between the ages of 11 and 26. We know that this is something we're going to be watching for the years to come, but based on what we're seeing today and based on looking at the adults in that 18 to 26 category, there are a lot of insights that are helping us understand we need to think differently about how we engage this group. And we pursued this bit of research because we know this tide is changing. Our board members, our members are feeling this. And we want all who are involved in the food industry to be prepared to embrace what makes this generation unique and those pressures they're going to be having back on us. And I will say it's not all pressure. There's a lot of opportunity as we think about the food system and all the stories we have to tell. We really believe that many of the values that this generation has align with those who are working in the food system and importantly making decisions about the food and beverages we consume. So what I'll go over today is an overview of who is Gen Z, because we get that question a lot. What are the eating habits that are driving their decision making and making them think differently about today's food system? And then most importantly, how can we engage them? And the them is Gen Z consumers, the Gen Z workforce, and Gen Z farmers and ranchers. One of the things I would say as well is I know we have quite a diversity of people who are involved in participating in today's session, and we do have people all the way from those who are doing research, those who are developing technologies, those who are actually putting seeds in the ground and caring for animals on farms, all the way to retailers, food companies, restaurants, who are ultimately on the front lines of food. So we know there's a lot of people who are thinking about this and from very different angles across the system. One of the things we'll drop in the chat here, but I'd love to know from you, what's the one word you would use to describe how you're currently feeling about engaging Gen Z? So go ahead and drop those in as I get started and giving just this flyover of who is Gen Z. But again, what's one word you'd use to describe how you're currently feeling? So first and foremost, I mentioned this group is about, between 11 and 26. Born between 1997 and 2012. And this emerging consumer segment brings a distinct set of values, behaviors, and purchasing power, importantly. Their decisions about food are influenced by their perceptions of the values of people in companies who are involved in the system, the approaches they use to make decisions, and ultimately the impact of people, animals, and the planet from this industry. Today, Gen Zers make up about 20% of our US population. And when we look at the global population, it's even larger, with it being a full third. This generation is the fastest growing economic power. And it's predicted that by 2030, they will surpass millennials' incomes and they will have purchasing power up to $33 trillion. They are the most diverse ethnically and racially that we've seen as well. So according to Pew Research, they represent the leading edge of the country's changing makeup. And today they are about 52% non-Hispanic white, but it is projected that in 2026, the projected majority will be non-white. This is a group that's less likely to drop out of high school, and they're more likely to enroll in college. So they really do value the education, and they understand the role it's going to play and the importance of it in their future. They champion technology to solve problems, especially and importantly, where that technology and innovation leads to solutions that improve their life or the planet. And this is going to be important for us because there's a lot that's going on throughout the food system that we can tout the technology, and specifically we can say, here's what it's solving for, that the consumer who doesn't understand food and agriculture really will benefit from. And lastly, on this one, they're driven by social causes. Think about this. They're inheriting the problems that our planet faces and is currently wrestling with. They've seen the impact of social causes. They've seen the impacts of unification around belief systems and activation when you've got a group of people who believe in and are willing to put in the work. And so they want to take that power and be a drive for good in this world. Further, as we think about who they are and really what drives them and what are the realities of the world, we look to their digital snapshot, because this generation has never known life without a smartphone. This means they're not only digitally intuitive, but they're digitally reliant. So as of the last quarter of 2022, 96% of the Gen Z internet users own a smartphone globally. In the United States, it's slightly higher. So of those who are accessing the internet, 97% of them are doing it on their smartphone. They might be doing this with other devices, but this is really important to understand. They're accessing this information constantly. Of Gen Z adults, so those 18 plus, nearly 50% of them are using social media at least 3 hours a day. 52% of them are using messaging apps at least 3 hours a day, and 42% are gaming 3 hours a day or more. So this is something that's important for us to understand as we think about the content that we're developing, the channels through which we're putting it out there, and the type of interactions that this generation is looking for in the content that is produced. Certainly, again, that leads us to how do we show up? And this generation really gravitates towards stories, regardless of what channel they're in. They want to be engaged in a different way. And I would say, in general, our research would tell us, tell me a story and you're going to increase people's engagement, and especially where it ties to a bigger goal, an outcome that they care about, et cetera. This is a group that actually, when we think about the tolerance for longer form content, we're actually seeing a changing of the tide here as well, because this generation seems to have an appetite for a bit longer type of content, like video blogs or vlogs, and maybe even how-to videos. Now, these last two, one thing to understand, this isn't just about educating them through long form content. This is something I hear very consistently from the food system. Hey, if we could just educate these people, and the fill in the blank of these people is a lot of different groups. But the challenge is if we just focus on education, we will lose. So our educational content has to be enlightening, include some surprises. There has to be an element of entertainment built in. We can't see this long form content as our push or our recommendation to go ahead and publish every detail we have about food safety or things that we're doing about, to increase environmental sustainability on the farm, or pulling in every single data table from a comprehensive study around an important, body of university research. We still need to present the end goals that they're interested in, and we have to do it in a way that's really relevant to their life and interests and in the language that they're looking for. So just understand they are looking for that kind of trifecta. Yes, education, but with enlightenment, with entertainment. As we think about the top channels, where do they find themselves? This is really important to understand because we always get asked, where are they? Which channels should I be engaging in? So 75% of Gen Zers who are on the internet and leveraging social channels are on YouTube today. They're looking to YouTube as their own search engine. So for those of us who are a little older, who might use Google or Bing or other search engines to find information, they're doing this through social platforms, and the number one source is YouTube. Secondarily, but still above that 50% mark, are both TikTok and Instagram. Think about those platforms. It's all about visual, video, moving, sounds, all of those different senses are really cared for as you think about TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. It's moving, it's motion. We used to say, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and I would say a video is worth 1,000 pictures. So just understand that the more visual, the more senses it appeals to, the more it seems Gen Z is paying attention. Just below 50% is Snapchat, and then falling off from there are both Facebook and Twitter. Importantly as well, in terms of how they're using these and how they're looking at this to influence their decision-making, almost 80% of Gen Zers say that they would purchase something that an influencer recommended through a social media channel. So influencers have importance. Of course, you and I would know together that influencer does not necessarily equate to expert, but because somebody has opted into and is following and engaging with an influencer, that increases the likelihood that they are going to take that, that input and that recommendation, and, according to the statistics, up to 80%. Additionally, we know that people are looking specifically for inspiration around food on TikTok at more than 50%. So again, they're leveraging these channels in ways that may be different than you and I have in the past. Next, how is that relationship then with Gen Z looking as it relates to food? We know that this generation is looking to food to solve some different jobs or being hired to serve some different jobs. It goes beyond basic sustenance. While price, taste, and convenience will always be factors that people will put, their foods and beverages through the lens of, this goes, far beyond just those basics. So we'll dig into this in a minute when I go through CFI's Illuminate report that really digs into Gen Z eating habits. But I want to tie, I want you to understand kind of the flyover that we're seeing not only in our research, but in a lot of research that's being done on this unique generation. So first and foremost, they do tie what they put in their mouth to their identity. So 68% of respondents said, absolutely, these products that I'm buying are a reflection of my personality, my values, and my beliefs. And when you look at the statistics around baby boomers, for example, it's just 43% of them that would say, yeah, there's something that I would say this is tied to my identity. So in other words, the younger generations are more likely to tie that brand or the company's impact on society to their shopping decisions. They're looking to how is my buying this contributing to either good or potentially the opposite. 32%, climate change, environmental sustainability, these different words, carbon emissions, all of these are very much top of mind for these consumers. 75% of them say as it relates to environmental issues and sustainability, the world is at a tipping point. And so that makes them feel a bit helpless, and where they can have control over their decisions that tie back to environmental sustainability, they're going to make that choice. 68% of them have said, I've been personally impacted by severe weather, and 32% say climate change has had a major impact on their everyday food and beverage choices. And when you compare that to baby boomers, even every adult in the category 18 plus, you can see that's significantly higher when compared to those other groups. So this is something that's really important for us to pay attention to, because whether the impacts it's had on their life are super significant, like it has flooded their home or they've had a severe weather event, they're saying this is far more impactful than other generations. Additionally, this group of consumers is shopping online for groceries weekly, and 35% of them are doing that. And when they're doing it, more than 50% of them are reading labels. This is important because we're all interested, whether you're on the farm and thinking about how can maybe companies I partner with throughout the supply chain talk about what it is that we're doing on the farm that makes a difference for, that end product, whether you're in a product marketing role or a communications function within an organization, understanding that label is a place where people are getting information, as well as the digital places they're getting information to do that online shopping, whether that's through the grocery store, through the product page itself. This is an abundance of information that's coming at them. But if 50% of those 35% shopping online are looking at those labels, you can understand they may be looking for a lot of variety of types of information. And again, we'll get into those Gen Z eating habits that'll get a bit more specific to what they might be looking for. Gen Z consumers also set themselves apart from others by really craving immersive experiences while also demanding transparency. So they are a group that we think is really quite fun, because they're actually willing to put in that time, immerse themselves, and then have that active dialogue. This is why we actually felt, as we did our dig into this research, as we wanted to pressure test some of the theories that we had about the value systems of Gen Z consumers and those of us in the food system, we felt that an in-person experience would provide these Gen Zers with a backstage pass to both the farming and the food side of the system. And we wanted to really be able to pressure test again, is what we think is true actually true when we can engage with them. That also helped us set up the recommendations that we've made through the Gen Z engagement guide, which we'll get here in the past. So we did engage six Gen Zs in an influencer tour, if you will, and an experience. We brought together 3 Gen Z farmers and 3 Gen Z foodies, if you will, consumer influencers, for an immersive experience. And we actually ran 2 of these, one in Texas, one in Iowa. We focused on beef production in particular, because we know that there's a lot of information that might feel conflicting in the trends that we see, in the ways that people are saying this is more or less sustainable. There's a lot of times that cattle production and the beef industry comes up. So we wanted to run that through the lens of something that might be familiar and really pressure test what we were thinking. Ultimately, we ended up with a really great engagement. We developed our own content, which you can find at bestfoodfacts.org. And listed there as well are all of the pieces of content, the videos that we produced, as well as the reels, the blogs, the content that our attendees themselves produced. And again, you can find all of that at the website. But I'd encourage you to see the types of aha moments they had, the things that surprised them or enlightened them. They may be different than you might suspect with bringing people together and giving them that kind of both sides of the fence type of tour. Our goal there as well was to ensure that we were going from the meat case backward for those, especially who are on the consumer side and don't necessarily understand how and what decisions are made at the farm gate. And then we wanted the meat case forward to make sure that those in farming and agriculture really understood why there are concerns and skepticism and the questions that exist for those consumers who are only seeing food through the lens of the grocery store. So really interesting experience and great ahas and takeaways from those groups. So jumping into our Gen Z eating habits, what is it that they want, need, what are the jobs they're hiring their food to do? We jumped into some digital ethnography back in 2022 to really understand, again, what are the trends, what are the belief systems, the demographics, the attitudes, the values, the motivators that are really driving this group as they're thinking about their eating habits. When we do digital ethnography, we were really looking at those who are online and talking about eating habits. We look at long-form conversations. So we're looking at blogs and forums and news sites, even YouTube, where conversations are happening, not just a post here and there. And we're able to look at that content month over month. But in this case, again, we were trying to understand what is it that Gen Z eating habits look like. Overall, what we found is that the goal of Gen Zers is that they want to prove that they can express their true selves no matter the cost. And they're driven by the belief that being open about emotions is a reflection of their individualism. They want to express themselves, and that comes through even through the foods they choose. They are really focused on mental health as well, and that's something that comes through as well when we think about food. So this is an audience who's really prioritizing mental health, emotional health, and they don't want food to be associated with guilt. Something they really value is creativity. They think of creativity as the act of using unconventional thoughts and ideas to identify and find creative solutions for these recurring problems in life, in society, et cetera. So that's something that we can leverage in the food system, because certainly there's a lot of that has driven innovation, that's driven technologies that are really creating some positive outcomes. And belief, they really believe it's important to explore all these different possibilities. They don't want to maintain status quo. They want to make an impact, excuse me. So this is going to make a better future, and being able to explore in this way really adds to the experience of trying something new. And finally, fear. They have a real fear of not having access to advanced scientific solutions. So when it comes to health and nutrition in particular, as you'll see, they fear what's to come when they put something in their body. They fear premature aging, media, society has told them that, weight gain, muscle loss, mortality. These are all on the list of things that they're worried about, especially as they think about the lens of my eating habits. And more generally, they fear not knowing how to prevent or delay these processes and whether that's attached back to the foods and beverages that they consume. So there were 5 key areas that they really said, these are the things we're thinking about when I think about my eating habits. The first thing is smart indulgences. So these health-conscious consumers are looking for snacks that add healthy boosting ingredients. They want to look for treats that include not only the salty or the sweet side of things, but they include or incorporate fruit, nuts, veggies, dark chocolate. They are thinking about these as things that are adding vitamins and minerals and anti-inflammatory agents, et cetera. And so they're thinking about the use of sweets that are free from artificial flavors, additives, preservatives as an alibi to actually have the opportunity to indulge. They're going to satisfy their sugar cravings, by portion sizes. They're going to talk about small packages that help them prevent overeating. So being smart, but not inhibiting myself from indulging in anything that I really do love. Another habit that they have is building a better relationship with food. They really believe that intuitive and mindful eating is going to help them have a better overall relationship with food. Again, that's free of that stress and guilt that they feel coming at them in so many different ways. They often talk about how rigid and restrictive things like fad diets and disordered eating, have become or have caused. They've talked about the mental and the physical harm that have resulted from these types of restricted eating habits. They know yo-yo dieting is not a good thing. It actually increases the potential for weight gain and increases the potential of diabetes and depression. They're very, very curious about intuitive eating. So they're really trying to pay attention more to hunger and satiety cues. They're trying to choose foods that satisfy them physically and mentally. And they're really wanting to move away from the language that says this food is a good food, this is a bad food. So which I think is interesting, because if you follow trends and how other countries are marketing, in other countries, especially Europe, we've seen sort of the red, yellow, green labels on food to indicate this is something that is very healthy or nutritious, this is an okay food or not. And this generation is saying, no, I want to know that this is a meal that's packed with flavor, or it has these great attributes that help me feel good about it, so that when I want to indulge, I can do so in a way that's responsible and doesn't encourage, again, stress or guilt. This group is really looking to balance nutrition. They think that they can optimize their nutrition by developing a habit of eating a wide variety of foods, and especially plant-based ones. They discuss that dietary variety is something that they've really done to maximize those nutrients. They want to intake their vitamins and minerals, but they don't want to have to track it. So they're really interested in fiber. Gut health is something that's really started to make them pay attention to that. And they think a lot about microbiome. They've read about a healthy gut and the positive outcomes of paying attention to that. On that idea of plant-based, they're switching to this because they believe that it offers more nutritional density, more nutrients per calorie. And so they're slowly transitioning, but there does seem to be a transition to eating less meat versus just getting rid of it all altogether. So they're, leveraging things like the philosophy around meatless Mondays. They are maybe reducing the size of that size of that portion on their plate. So increasing fruits or veggies, decreasing the size of the animal product, the meat in particular. And they talk about following a plant-based or whole food diet as much as possible. Something that they are thinking about, though, with that swap out of taking away some of the meat or increasing plants is getting enough protein. And this has to do a lot with physical health, keeping skin and hair vibrant. They're talking about the impacts and understanding there are some trade-offs when you make these dietary changes. So they're paying attention. They don't always have the answers, or they don't always have the right language that we might use in the industry, but they do understand there are some trade-offs here in opting into or out of different food groups. Clean eating is another goal. Consumers are really thinking of this generation are thinking that long-term health means get rid of the processed foods, get rid of the ingredients you can't pronounce. We want to get rid of those things that are high in sugar and fat and unhealthy fats, salt. They want to eat foods that are closer to their original state, so more whole and simple foods. They are thinking about this from the perspective of low carb, low fat alternatives. They're leaning into things like keto diets and paleo or philosophies, even Mediterranean philosophies, again, to incorporate more of those veggies, more of the things that are actually closer to the food, when it was picked off the vine or pulled out of the ground. That's why things like zoodles, zucchini noodles instead of regular pasta are really great. People are mashing up avocados instead of, having the processed mayo. They also do, though, as we all know, worry about the higher cost of clean eating because this is a group that doesn't have, today, they don't have all the access to capital that they will eventually, but they are looking for lower priced, healthy ingredients and healthy foods because this is something that is of importance. So again, there's a recognition that there's a trade-off here. If you're trying to opt into all of these types of foods, that might limit your ability to actually participate. And finally, the fifth kind of key or topic that was raised when we did this research on Gen Z eating habits was that they really want to eat sustainably, excuse me. They want to do what they can to reduce their carbon footprint, and buying local ingredients and consuming less meat are a couple of the ways that they really feel they can be empowered to minimize their footprint. They are really thinking about the impact of their eating habits on the environment. And they read that the world's food system is responsible for about a quarter of the greenhouse gas emissions. There's a particular focus, like I said, on animal farming or livestock farming, and then the processing and the shipping that is involved, to get food where it needs to be and in the form that consumers can actually use it. They do consider eating less meat. They might try to, again, switch to that more plant-based as a result. But again, this is sort of an evolution, a transition that they'll make some smaller form trade-offs so that they can see and kind of taste test their way through the process. That other piece about local, they really have a belief that organic, local, and seasonal produce is more sustainable because, again, that shipping and the packaging is just minimized. They read that eating locally grown foods is the best way to lower the carbon footprint, and they believe that organic foods avoid, environmental harming pesticides and things that might make them concerned about their diet. Now, I will say here, there are lots of things that we on this call, everybody who's participating here, in some cases, way too much to have a really well-informed conversation with a consumer because of some of the beliefs that they bring forward, we know are just simply not completely accurate. So we have to lean into those conversations in a way that's filled with patience and care to understand why it is they say these things are important to them, in a way where we can say, that's really interesting, and I'm very interested in making sure that what I'm putting into my mouth, into my body, isn't harming me and actually is improving my health over time. And there might be some things that you hadn't thought of or maybe just didn't have access to that might surprise you. So starting the conversation in that way to say, what's going on in the system may be more sustainable than you currently understand, and having ears wide open to hear where the things that they believe are happening may actually be not in alignment with what's happening. So what they want isn't yet currently being met. So thinking about that is important, but proceeding in those conversations in a way that's careful and thoughtful is going to be really important. I'm going to pull up a quick poll here because our guide, I'm going to jump into our engagement guide, covers three audiences. Gen Z consumers, the Gen Z workforce, and then Gen Z farmers and ranchers. So what I want to know is when you think of each of these three stakeholders, which one is the highest priority for your organization? And I'll give everybody just a couple seconds here to weigh in. Three more seconds. All right, I'll pull up those results. It definitely looks like about 56% of you are saying the Gen Z consumer is the one that's the highest priority, but not too far behind. 32% are saying that farmer rancher and 12% with the Gen Z workforce. So that's something that's important for us to understand. Definitely the consumer is a big nut to crack, if you will. And frankly, independent of where you are along the food system chain, if you will, we know that ultimately, whether or not you're on the front lines of food and getting asked those questions directly, at some point, those questions start to trickle back throughout the chain. So really helpful and informative. Thank you for participating in that. As we jump in, we had some really interesting, again, ways to sort of pressure test these, but what we wanted to provide are some high-level ways that you can begin thinking about engaging with these different segments in Gen Z. And I will first and foremost say, once you've met one Gen Zer, you've met them. No, you've not met them all. You've met one Gen Z consumer. So you still have to think about engaging in a way that's thoughtful, is based on a process, and we'll go through what that looks like, and that you're really open to their input in a way that we don't run into it with assumptions about what they need or want or those sorts of things, but engaging in a way that really does inspire conversation. So the first thing is we really, as an industry, need to focus on our passions and goals. What we know based on CFI's very first research that we did around how do we build trust in this system we call food, is that shared values, showing up and saying, I care about the things that you care about, and let me show you how. That is 3 to 5 times more important than showing up with a book of facts or data or research that proves that what we're doing is the right thing to do. So you have to start by being you, talking about what makes you tick, talking about the long-term goals that you have, thinking about those that are aligned with eaters. We like to talk about consumers, but the reality is you and I are consumers too. We, in fact, eat and drink the products that come as a result of this industry that we have the privilege of serving in. So where we have that immediate connection and opportunity to build, to say, we're human, we're eaters, and we care about these same things is going to be really important. And knowing, just based on the research I presented, that sustainability and mindful eating and the innovations that bring progress forward are important, those are the types of things that we should weave in and say, this is how this is showing up. This is what we're doing about this. When we include that in what we talk about related to producing food and beverages, how you pursue your research, how you implement, those best practices that you're learning, that really connects with them and their heart in a way that's going to build a longer-term relationship so that trust is possible. Offering what they crave, again, that Illuminate report that I just shared out, we know that they want to be engaged. We know that they are, again, that generation that has never lived without a smartphone. So they are accustomed to getting whatever information they want, whenever they need it. And again, you and I both know that if we're not willing to put the information out there and engage with them, there is another group of people or a person who will be willing to fill that vacuum. So there's nobody better than those of you who are participating here today to help fill that in and answer the questions that are being asked. And I would encourage you, when you're asked a question, understand it's a privilege to be asked, because certainly somebody else could be being asked that question. And if your voice and your knowledge isn't in that conversation, we have the potential to lose. So we know, based on what we understand about transparency and the many elements of transparency, is that providing access to information that is accurate and authentic is really important. It needs to come from an expert who is passionate and has great insights. And equally important is the process through which that communication happens. We have to have sort of a two-way street through which they can exchange information, because engaging and being transparent isn't just a send it out once and your job is done. There needs to be that full dialogue, and it needs to be done over time. Highlight those technical and innovation wins that we've had. In the industry, again, we know that this group is really interested in different things. Yes, price, taste, convenience, quality, et cetera. But when they think about pure engagement and experiences with their food, they are looking to be enlightened, inspired, excited about what's coming out of that. And that focus on food safety, on sustainability, on food quality and nutrition, they're thinking about this through the lens of long-term health. And when we think about the different ways that the industry is making improvements for all of those different, attributes, we really have a unique story to tell, to say, yes, we care about these things too. That's why we've been doing these things. I think the other thing to understand is when they talk about food quality and healthfulness and food safety, there is a bit of gray area there. 10 years ago, when we would have asked about food safety, it really would have been about things that would have been interpreted and understood as things like salmonella and E. coli and things that threaten how safe my food is. Today, food safety is far more long-term, and it's far more future forward. Is it safe for me to feed this to my child who's going to grow up and potentially have health concerns as a result of this food? So food safety, healthfulness, our quality too are all tied together. So just important to understand that we can lean into that theme in a more broad way. Another opportunity is to seek out influencers. As you saw, we had our engagement experience where we brought together both sides, and I realize there are far more than two sides of this equation than just consumers and farmers. But we wanted to pull together an experience that allowed for shared learning, from each other and through the same process. So I would encourage you to think about, for the influencers that we can engage, We have a whole vetting process to make sure that the influencers we're engaging are great, they're authentic, and their value system aligns with us. That doesn't mean we agree on everything, but it does mean we will never invite somebody whose eating preferences are being a vegan to a livestock tour. That's quite an obvious one. But just making sure that you're inviting people who are aligned with your values is a really important piece to start from. You can leverage them to create campaigns on their most used social channels. Again, we know YouTube, TikTok, Instagram are really important, and these are the channels in which they're operating. This really creates, an outcome that leads to entertaining and, enlightening content. And again, that gets a two-way conversation going between them and their followers. And once they've had that backstage pass, once they've had the opportunity to interact with those true experts that you plan for and that you engage and that you train to make sure the information shared is relevant, now they are spearheading that information sharing on behalf of the industry. Again, you can't control what they say, but you can give them experience that empowers them to really tell the story and say, here's what I experienced, and actually keep that conversation going long term. This is something as well where you can think about partnering with them to promote content regarding specific types of foods that are going to align with those lifestyle and health goals that are so important to Gen Z. Of course, using video is going to be really important and empowering them to do so. I know that for those of us, or for those we've worked with who are involved in food processing, that's a little bit makes them nervous, especially when you're going, oh, these are proprietary processes or equipment that we're using. But thinking about how that can come to life and where you can allow them to turn on the cameras is really important, because that really is engaging content. And then certainly any of those ways that you can get them directly in connection with the different types of experts that are involved in the system is going to be really important. This last one, pursue conversations, influencer engagement, whether it's with a true, what we would qualify as an influencer digitally, or even just influencers in your communities or in the different circles in which you find yourself. Be really patient. Go into conversations, making sure that your goal is not to fix people's opinions or correct misinformation or educate them or shut them down. Make sure that you're heading into those conversations with the understanding that this will be a journey, and that the conversations that you have or the questions that you receive may not be the ones that you want or that you expect. And I'm not saying they're the ones that you want or expect because they're just so scientific or so hard to answer. Oftentimes, it's exactly the opposite. Oftentimes, the questions that are asked by consumers are very, very simple and might not even be using the right language. They might be riddled with issues or topics that have nothing to do with each other, but that's the best way they know how to ask. And the reality is they don't have much access to the food system and the people within it. They don't understand necessarily what food processing looks like. They don't understand all the careers that are happening in this industry. Some of them have not heard of a plant breeder or a food scientist. So these are all new concepts for them. This does not mean they're uneducated. It just simply means they don't have access to people to really pressure test their understanding. So again, these questions are, I would say, infrequently asked in a way that is fully informed. So you have to have patience for it and really lean into, help me understand why that's important to you. Or when you say that, how does that show up for you? Or why is that something that you're thinking about or interested in? I'd love to know more. So going into that with, again, true patience and an engagement process that doesn't make them feel like now they don't have enough education to be in the conversation with you. When we think about engaging the Gen Z workforce, this is something that's really important and different from thinking about the Gen Z consumer or even the farmer. This is something that we've seen and helped companies who are going, wow, we need a sustainability plan, not because of our direct customer, but because the people we want to hire to work in this company don't really trust us, or they don't think we have all of this figured out. So we have to show to them our values are important and they're coming through in everything we do. So first and foremost, and I would say this is probably true for everybody, not even Gen Zers, and across all the ways where we really want to get engagement, it's important to give them a voice. They want to speak up. They want to be heard. They want to impact change. So we have the opportunity to empower them to have a voice in the workplace. maybe not the decision-making power, but again, that process of stakeholder engagement that allows them to have a sense of belonging and reinforce they can impact change over time. That also will impact potentially and improve the longevity, that they're staying with the company and providing their insights. Really offering opportunities to grow through training, promotions. This is valuable to them and can lead them into leadership roles where they're really well suited. Values, if you've heard CFI talk about anything, you know how important we feel values are, but they really want to work for companies that stand for something. So think about when you look at your company, when you look at the page where people might be going to learn more about you before they show up to an interview, is it clear what you believe in? Are you clearly communicating your vision, your values, those sorts of things? Which social issues and causes are most important to your company? There are some really high statistics that I didn't get into today that I'd be happy to share if you want to follow up with me around how many, what percentage of these Gen Z consumers want CEOs to speak out on social issues. This is really important for them to understand that companies they're going to affiliate are wearing their heart on their sleeve. This is very, very different, a different expectation than in previous generations, and it allows them to say, yes, this is somebody I'm going to attach my own personal brand to. So making sure that you're communicating transparently on social channels, websites, job postings during that recruitment process is going to be important. And thinking about how you can empower your employees to actually get involved in some of those causes and those things that are important to you is also going to be important. So it's not only the saying it's important, but providing them opportunities to follow through on it and demonstrate not only do we say we are, but we actually are taking steps to impact change. Mental health, as mentioned, this is the first demographic who has said mental health is something that's on my mind and something I'm seriously prioritizing. So this is something that, as companies, organizations, employers understand that they very seriously value well-being and the resources that are attached to that focus. Supportive leadership, educational resources, employee assistance programs that, offer counseling. The other thing that's really important here, especially for those of you who are in leadership teams and management, you must set the stage and create a culture where it's expected that employees can voice their needs without judgment. Educating your leaders, your managers on recognizing the importance and the signs of mental health struggles, and really building some different types of skills. We often talk about this as EQ, not IQ. But this will help teach the importance of setting boundaries and reducing those stress and anxiety levels that are just pervasive, one in society, but two specifically for this audience. Flexibility, yes, we all know COVID-19 has really made us think differently about hybrid work and how those models can work over time, and especially for the benefit of work-life balance. But it's up to those employers as well to provide opportunities then for connection for those who are working remotely, who don't have the opportunity to fully engage in the same way that those in-office people are interacting. And so, one-on-one calls with supervisors are great for catch-ups, for touch bases, the type of water cooler chat that isn't focused on what are the 4 things you need to be doing. And also finding opportunities to bring people together over time will be important because that simply just cannot be swapped out. Technology is so important and it's so intuitive for this group. So where possible, provide them access to the latest technology and allow them to test it, to test it, to really pressure test whether this can work for the processes and the outcomes you need. But where they can try out some software, different platforms or even hardware that are going to allow them to communicate more effectively and work more efficiently, I would say let them do it. They love it, they're great at it, and it's far more intuitive to them. Another element here is seeking out a diverse workforce. As I mentioned, there's a lot of diversity coming, and it's going to look different than it has in previous generations. And looking at a survey actually from Monster.com, 83% of Gen Z candidates said that the company's commitment to diversity and inclusion is very important when choosing an employer. So again, it's not just about how much are you going to pay me, what's my days off look like. It's more than that. They want to ensure that this company is doing the right thing and thinking broader than perhaps companies have had to in yesteryear. This is also important to understand. There's great research that focuses on companies who are more diverse are more likely to outperform less diverse companies on profitability. So yes, it's great for, our incoming generation to say we're thinking about this, we're prioritizing this, but at the end of the day, there's great business reasons to think about how we can become more diverse and seek out more diverse perspectives at every level in our company. And lastly, tailoring our recruitment process. I've worked with a group that really focuses on executive recruitment, and they've said there's something that's definitely changed, and we're not interviewing people, our candidates are interviewing us. So when you think about all the recommendations above, making sure that your people who are in positions to recruit and hire, your hiring managers are equipped with the resources to tailor your job offerings, your job descriptions in a way that really suits the needs of this generation. Next is the Gen Z farmers and ranchers. And I realize maybe not everybody throughout the food system will look at this group, but when we think about all of the different stakeholders that are involved in food and agriculture, obviously food doesn't come to be without the farmer and the rancher. And so when we were thinking about how can organizations who are directly involved with their members, the farmers and ranchers, how can they be equipped to really engage this group? That's what these recommendations are really based on. When we think about this, again, let's ask first and listen with really big, wide open ears. What we know is that Gen Z farmers and ranchers are going to think differently about being involved in organizations and the role that they play. A great first step is just to start asking them. They're not likely to engage in the same way that their parents, grandparents, et cetera, have engaged in board of directors or committees or action teams. So we have to really be proactive, in understanding how they can uniquely contribute that fits with their goals, which fits with their passions, and ultimately fits with their life. We really want to understand the ways that you can understand that. Maybe just do a periodic survey, maybe get a small working group together and say, we're looking to engage differently. We don't know what that looks like, but tell us what concerns you, tell us what you need, tell us what you get excited about, tell us what you don't want. Just having a quite open conversation to ensure that you're not making assumptions about how engaging and empowering them will work out best. Empowering them to tell the stories about what they're excited about, the progress they've seen, the innovations that are really driving things forward is going to be very important. We know the importance of storytelling and engagement, as well as the wonderful vehicle that digital channels can be. And so these Gen Zers are really poised to bring both of those together beautifully. They won't need a lot of training likely on the social channels and how to make things, get that posted, make them entertaining, et cetera. But because they're younger, because it hasn't been their job to be a, corporate communicator, right? They may need more guidance on how to talk with non-farmers about the technologies in the business and ultimately why they do what they do. To ensure that what is shared is relevant for people who aren't farmers, right? Relevant to people who don't understand agriculture inside and out and backwards in the way that those are farming really do. So making sure there's some ways to train them on that, the messaging, that, not actually on the social tools. Enabling growth and development opportunities. We know that, again, they really value education. They're more likely to go into college, and absolutely that is true for farmers and ranchers. Most everybody is educated beyond high school. So providing them some easy avenues to share their ideas so that they feel connected, they feel that they have an impact, and making sure that they have opportunities to really be developed through maybe networking and mentorship programs for the generations of farmers who have come before them in a way that allows them to have growth that brings history forward but doesn't prohibit doing things in a new way. Fostering a diverse, equitable, inclusive culture is going to be important, maybe mostly for the older generations. Those who are living as Gen Zers are largely open, and I think DE&I should be prioritized. But when you think about your staff, your leaders, those who've been around a while, providing some staff training and resources that really emphasize that individuals of all ages, genders, races, cultures are to be both valued and respected. This can really help benefit the full decision-making process at all levels of an organization. The next piece, last piece here, is really establishing connections, again, between those generations. This is something we have the opportunity to remind the older leaders of the value of leveraging the excitement of younger farmers and ranchers, their willingness to take risks, and maybe even their willingness and ability to spend more time and energy seeking out some solutions to these long-standing issues that we've had in the industry. And also help the younger farmers and ranchers understand that the passion and the energy of those previous farmers when they were younger has gotten us to some of the great outcomes that we've had and the great progress that we see throughout the industry. So lots of information to unpack. I will just pull up here quickly. If you haven't had the opportunity, you can download the Engaging Gen Z guide today. I've given a flyover of all of the content that's available in that guide, and there's more than what I presented today. But please feel free to go to foodintegrity.org, and we'll drop that link into the chat box here as well to download the guide and certainly keep the conversation going with us as well. I'm going to just pull this up. If you want to engage the Gen Z consumer, workforce, farmer, or rancher, we would be happy to chat with you for lots of different angles of that. So if you have a need for getting a speaker to, unveil the research, to help them understand and get into the right mindset to think about this generation. If you want to hear directly from consumers, we do set up consumer panels, so you can have that again direct from the source, words directly from their mouth at an engagement event that you have coming up. If you feel like training is something you need, we have a whole training program that really helps people think differently, switches their mindset around engaging. And to be able to make those messages on the fly with these important stakeholders. And certainly if you'd be interested in pursuing a Gen Z influencer engagement event, we'd be happy to share our learnings or even partner with you for something like that. So I've got Kelly's information there. We'll also drop that into the chat box to ensure that you've got the opportunity to follow up if you're interested. At this point, we're going to go ahead and transition to questions. And so I'll pull those up. There's one question I do see here about, are these slides going to be available? And yes, we can certainly provide these following that, Christy, so we'll be happy to do that. I have another question here. You haven't gotten into the interest in hands-on work, but it's something that I see a lot. Doing community college and going with trades like welding, they want to build skills for a year or two. So is there anything that we've looked into? Janice, I appreciate that question. We haven't necessarily looked into those trades, but what I would say is making sure we have the opportunity for Q&A, if that's something that we're really looking into and needing to prioritize, starting there. Again, this is more about the broader, what do we know about this generation, than what does it specifically mean for, going into this specific trade or this type of workforce involved in food and agriculture. There's another question here. And I'm seeing the comments come through as well in the chat box as well. So I'm looking through the comments on what's the one word to describe how you feel about Gen Z. And energized, excited, connected, confused, unclear. So it seems like there's a pretty good mix there. If you want to drop those in, you can certainly put those into the chat feature again. The other thing that I would call out is when you think about, what is the one thing you would want the Gen Z audience to know about food, farming, production, processing? What's the one thing you would want them to know? Go ahead and drop that into the chat feature as well. If you could have Gen Z know any one thing about farming, food, production, processing, what's the one thing you'd want them to know? We've seen a couple other questions come through here. And another one, well, the information, we will send out the recording of this webinar. Do we have insights on sustainable eating and drinking cow milk? So that's something very specific. We did not go into specific products or, but what I would say in general, where something is tied to an animal protein, that is something that consumers are saying, I'm trying to eat less of that. Specific to dairy and beef cattle production as well, we know that there are more sensitivities there. We did not do the deep dive on that particular topic. What we were really looking at is the broader Gen Z eating habits that exist. I see a question here from Mike. Thanks for the question. We're hearing farmers again say we need to feed the world. Farmers are the original environmentalists. I like the latter better than the first. Feeding the world, we understand, is kind of a, doesn't create the reaction that we want from consumers, and that's because it feels like a conflicting message. Feeding the world, maybe that's not our job. Maybe our job is to teach people around the world to feed themselves. Two, we don't have, we don't need to feed the world. We need to make sure, that we have everybody has access to great nutrition and at the level that's going to keep them healthy. Those are the types of messages. We feel great pride in making continuous improvement year over year and having an evolution to the way that we farm and that we produce our food. And talking about being an environmentalist and saying we've always had a mind's eye on recycling, and here's how we've done that. I think those are some of the different ways that that can be framed. Looking at a couple more questions here. Thank you for those insights as well on what you would want Gen Zers to know about specifically. What do you want to know? What do you want Gen Z consumers to know? I'm sorry, I just repeated the question that we asked. Let me get back here. We just have a couple additional questions. Yes, the mental health, how exactly are you linking it to food? Gut microbiome, sustainability, yes, both of those things, and then long-term health. I don't want my food to make me feel, I don't want to feel guilty or stressed about choosing food. So the information that's simple, straightforward, that doesn't seem to have to be hidden or sought out. Again, those transparency principles provide the information and make it very relevant to them. Very, very interesting and important to them. There's another question here from Shannon. As Gen Z is concerned about environmental sustainability, what segment in particular, greenhouse gases, water usage, material, is there any more data or concern with sustainability and where it's rooted? Shannon, it really depends on the individual you're talking to. For some people who maybe they grew up on the coast, and so any issue that's tied to water is going to be far more important to them. Maybe for those that are sitting in the middle of the Midwest and not thinking about that and the impact on the ocean, and maybe not thinking about floods or droughts or whatever, maybe something like pesticide use for soil quality or something like that is going to be more important. But any and all of these topics are things that different people in this generation, and I'll say other generations, are thinking about. We leverage a process called Listen, Ask, Share. This is what we train, and it's based on our trust-based model for how we earn trust in the food system. And we have to listen for the values. We have to listen for what is it that's important to this person versus what do they have wrong? How do they need to be educated? What is it that they need me to fill in the facts on? So listen for those underlying concerns and the values that might be driving them. Ask questions to increase our understanding about what specifically related to environmental sustainability might you be interested in. And then going through that process a couple times, because again, as I mentioned, they don't always have the right language or a language that aligns with what we know to be true in agriculture and food production. And then at the end of that process, listen, ask, 3 times. Then we can share, okay, so it sounds like you're most interested in carbon emissions. Here's what I can tell you about, or here's a resource that I would encourage you to look at. Those are the different types of things that we would encourage. I see there are a couple additional questions I was not able to get to. You can feel free to email me at roxi.beck@foodintegrity.org to follow up on any of those. We will be following up with some resources in the recording after this is done, but I just thank you so much for spending an hour today with us to really start to understand more about this generation and what's to come. Again, we're very excited and we see a lot of promise to tell the stories of sustainability, of nutrient-dense food, of all of the innovations and technology that are really driving us forward to be a great industry to participate with. And again, if any additional conversations, needs, questions, I'd love to engage with you. Thanks so much and have a great day.